Welcome. So glad you tuned in on Leap of Faith as we explore ethos. Ethos is about the characteristic spirit of our Catholic culture. It is about trust, credibility, authority. We partner with the University of Dayton as we seek to explore critical issues of our church that help us to broaden our perspective and reimagine our faith. Take the leap with us. Explore the religious imagination. Our theme for today is early childhood faith formation. This is the process by which young children come to know God, an awakening process. This awakening has its beginning in early childhood and is based on developing the child's awareness of God using life experiences relevant to the development of a young child, ages 3, 4, and 5. The child at this young age is able to relate to the care and love of God through self-identity, nature, and the love of others. Evaluating the why, what, where, when, who, and how of children's faith formation isn't optional. It is essential. And as a Catholic, as a catechist, I underscore this. It is essential. The spiritual well-being of this generation of children is at stake. With declining numbers of children embracing Christ, it's incumbent on us to thoroughly examine and critically analyze the meaning of early childhood faith formation and the role parents and teachers play for making a difference. So today I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. We have with us two outstanding Catholic educators who have a vast number of years of experience exploring critical questions regarding early childhood faith formation. So I'm going to introduce you first to Dr. Shauna Adams. She's the Executive Director of Early Learning, which includes the university's demonstration school, the Bombeck Family Learning Center. At the University of Dayton, she serves on a number of early childhood councils and committees, regionally and at state and national levels. Dr. Adams is a co-author of an early childhood faith formation series for RCL entitled Stories of God's Love, as well as a textbook in early childhood program administration. In 2022, the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education awarded Dr. Adams their 2022 AACTE Margaret B. Lindsay Award for Distinguished Research in Teacher Education. The award recognizes an individual whose research over the last decade has made a significant impact on the field of teacher education. So, Dr. Adams, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here.
We are pleased to have you. And Suzanne Ferguson is a former executive director of the Center for National Education at the University of Dayton. She collaborated on a national level, creating the standards for Catholic education. She served on a number of Catholic organizations and committees within the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, as well as on the university campus. Sarah has also collaborated with Dr. Adams in writing Stories of God's Love, with the primary responsibility for family engagement. The focus of the publication is to encourage parents to pray with their children early on and to attend parish functions with faith and enthusiasm. And of course, we have our dear Sister Angela Ann Zukowski. She, as we were talking and telling Dr. Adams earlier on, she is part Trinity and has been visiting us for many years, assisting in developing Catholic communications in the region. She is the director of University of Dayton's Institute for Pastoral Initiatives and the Virtual Learning Community for Faith Formation. Sister Angela Ann is also co-producer of this Ethos show and brings to us a wealth of expertise in Catholic education with our guests and our panelists. So we want to welcome all to our show today. So let's start with you, Dr. Adams. Early childhood is a time of allowing children to experience God in concrete ways through what they can see and touch and taste, hear and smell. So share with us your philosophy in early childhood to awaken the child's faith and provide a strong foundation on which children can grow in the love of God.
This is an excellent question. And sometimes if you happen to either teach older children or are the parent of older children, it's really hard to remember what it was like to be a preschooler. So sometimes we will try to put things in place that are really designed for older children. Little kids, young children, their job is to make sense of their world. And they do that by attaching any new learning that they have onto existing knowledge. So they may be exploring maybe what a dog is, for example. And if you're taking a young child on a walk, they may look and see a dog that's a mid-sized dog and it's black. And they will look at that and say, doggy. And you say, absolutely, yes, that is a dog. Well, the next time they will see a little teeny tiny chihuahua and you will say, dog. And they will say, no. Can't be a dog. So you talk about the features of how it could be a dog, and they get it. Okay, fur, has a tail, 4 legs. And so they go on next to see a cat. 4 legs, fur. They go, dog. And they say, no, that is a cat. Their new concept of what this animal is has emerged by tying it to what they knew before. So our job as catechists for young children, as teachers for young children, as parents for young children, is to help them establish the meaning for what they already know so that they can go on and learn more about new things. Can I give you an example? So I am, my office is at our Children's Center, and I enjoy walking around on the playground. And I was watching this teacher who was following the children, and they were looking at this bird's nest that was up in the tree, and they were absolutely fascinated and excited. And our goal is to get to joyful learning, and it was obvious they had joyful learning about this. The teacher knew that she wanted to talk and teach them some skills related to faith formation, but she did not pull them away from their joyful experience. She incorporated faith formation into that and answered their questions, didn't take them away from that, and ended up saying, isn't it wonderful that God has created this world that has so many perfect and beautiful things? So making a connection to what they already know is very important.
Wonderful, Dr. Adams, thank you. And you know, that should also be our goal, even as adults, getting to joyful learning. You know, sometimes we learn with drudgery rather than joy. So, Suzanne, you have a long history preparing your University of Dayton students to understand what faith formation is among young children. How is it different for older children?
Well, going along with what Dr. Adams said, the teaching methods utilized must be geared for the young child. As Piaget noted, children in this phase of life operate on a more concrete level of thinking. As older children may be able to think in a more abstract way, young children's faith formation must be closely tied to, as Dr. Adams said, their everyday experience of family and budding friendships. Seeing Jesus as their friend is key to helping children equate the concrete gestures of love offered by their family as a means to know how much Jesus loves them. Gospel messages must be provided through story form that young children can understand. An example of the difference between the methods one might use for a young child would be perhaps in the case of baptism. Likely, it would be best for the young child to actually witness a baptism and then ask them to notice different actions and symbols and signs and talk with them about it later. But in the case of an older child, they might be able to read about it or maybe watch a video. It would be good for them as well to see a baptism, but for a young child, that's crucial to actually have that experience. A former university student of mine that was trained as a catechist, as a religion teacher, told me that he is now teaching younger children than he thought he was going to teach. And he noticed that he really had to make his pace a little bit slower, really analyze the concepts he was trying to teach, and create them in a way that was incremental so that little people could better understand what the broader concept might be. So we have to keep in mind, what can our children understand at this stage of the game? Not give them so much that it's just too abstract for them. As Dr. Adams said, they're so anxious to know more in the case of the bird's nest. So, let's take our time and let them experience and explore. I was also thinking about the classroom environment and how wonderful music is in our religious faith. So when we teach children songs about Jesus, how can we make sure that they're short enough and simple enough that the child can remember it? Maybe using a familiar tune, but changing the words to emphasize whatever spiritual concept we are trying to teach. Also, little children need breaks. They can't, they're not going to be able to handle a lecture even for 15 minutes. So you have to make sure that you vary your activities in a way that the children can keep their attention. And again, allow them to move, because movement is very much the way they learn. So when we talk about music, making sure that we have hand gestures or signs, I think will really help the children remember the song, but also the concepts that are a part of it as well. So just a few suggestions on methodology when we are working with the young child.
Wonderful. I have been taking notes, Suzanne, because we have a First Communion class in my parish, so I'm definitely writing down that breaks, movement, music with hand gestures. So thank you for that. Dr. Adams, we hear a lot about the so-called social and emotional learner as a cornerstone for faith formation in young children. So can you explain or describe for our viewers what this means?
So social emotional learning is something that has become front and center in education kind of for all ages. However, it is especially important for young children. I think the pandemic made it front and center for kids outside of the early childhood frame. Developmental needs and where children are developmentally have made it very important for early childhood. Everything is strengthened. We're all about growing the brain in the early years, and the way to do that best is to impact the emotional center of the brain. Let me give you an example. I want you to think back to one of your earliest memories. Very few people have a lot of detailed memories about being a preschooler, but let me give you one of mine. So I can think back to a time when we were visiting my grandmother, and she had this small house in Cincinnati. I was about 4 years old. The aunts were sitting around and Grandma was there talking. The smell, which smell is so tightly associated with emotions, the smell of her Irish soda bread was right there. I could taste it because she had a piece of it on the table for me. The part that I remember the most is she had these very intricate glass figurines. and she trusted me enough to play with them. I was so proud that she trusted me. That pride, it helped cement that emotion and that experience. I remember hearing my aunts and my mom, all of whom have passed, just listening to grandma tell stories about Ireland. My grandmother was an immigrant from Ireland. It was something that I could remember in more detail than anything else. Probably my earliest memory. That's what we want young children to associate. We want them to feel the joy, experience it in the things that they're doing in everyday life, and then tie God and religious concepts that we would like to teach to those. On the flip side, we have to avoid creating negative memories associated with God. We know little kids' brains develop first in the emotional center, and they are able to develop more thoroughly if their positive emotions are in place. So, in contrast, my negative emotion, I have no memory of how this happened, but in kindergarten, I ended up inside of a dark locker and I couldn't get out. I can, to this day, remember the smell of it, the fear of it, how embarrassed and shameful I felt. Those are my two emotions that I can remember back to in that early childhood era. And we want my memory associated with God to be the first one. So notice how I mentioned smell and taste, and hearing, as Susan identified, music. Those are all things that activate the emotional center of the brain. We also have to realize that social emotional learning isn't just something that happens. It is important to teach kids how to identify and manage their emotions, self-regulation, acceptance when their feelings are different than others. We don't minimize their feelings, because to be a healthy adult person, who can embrace their faith requires them to have social emotional skills and social emotional understanding.
Wonderful. Dr. Adams, thank you for that explanation and for sharing your experience. It is really meaningful. And you talked about play. So, Suzanne, how is play the best approach to teach young children about their faith?
Well, really, children's play is their work. And in Dr. Adams and my work, our publications demonstrated the need to use characters and stories about children. So this was our faith formation book. These characters were the same ages as the age of the children who are using the texts. Young children often use imaginative play and pretend to be characters that they read about and they see in the media. The characters in our stories made appropriate choices that demonstrated their love for their family, their friends, and for Jesus. And in play, children are often practicing decision-making that parallels their day-to-day experience. So providing positive examples of characters and stories gives children a model to follow. So as Dr. Adams said, those choices in terms of emotions and social situations, to provide children with a guide via appropriate stories connected to the story of Jesus is really, I think, a wonderful way to establish some habits of thinking, of feeling, of being with other people. So there are also programs for the Catechists of Young Children that offer small size materials that children can hold and see and hear about and feel. And these methods provide names of holy objects the priest uses, for example, during Mass, so that the children might better understand when the celebrant is doing what he's doing, and to the degree to what the child is capable, why the celebrant is doing what he is. I have a friend whose children are now parents, and they so invested in helping their 5-year-old son understand the Mass that he wanted vestments for himself to pretend he was a priest. And his aunt, who is a great seamstress, made him vestments so he can pretend to hold Mass. And you know, if we did those kinds of activities, would seeds of vocation be planted earlier? Might children aspire to be vowed religious? I don't know, but I just thought it was a beautiful example. Also, I thought a lot about the creche scene. My own grandchildren, we have a creche scene, and they just like to know about the figures and tell the stories with the actual characters or little figures in their hands. And there's a toy manufacturer that makes a beautiful a creche scene, and I've bought 2 of them. I'm going to buy a 3rd. I have 3 sons. Every son's child and children will have their creche scene, but then they can tell the story. And I think it's just a great, tell it to their other family members, to grandparents. It's a wonderful, beautiful way, again, in a hands-on way, to know the beautiful story of Christmas, and to again be more invested in it. And maybe they're so naturally curious, maybe ask us more questions. So just a few examples of how play and faith formation really can be so well tied together.
Yes, thank you for that, Suzanne. Wonderful, concrete ideas. So, Dr. Adams, how has your role as the Executive Director of Early Learning impacted your writing of copious books and articles? And what do you hope your writings are designed to achieve?
So, what I write about is not my personal experience. It is because my office is in the Bombeck Family Learning Center. I am the only faculty member that has an office down there. So I see little kids, infants, toddlers, and preschoolers every day. I talk to their teachers every day. I work with the administration. And so I feel like I have gained kind of the big picture of what it's like to teach young children, and what teachers need and administrators need to be able to do that. I am blessed because I can just walk into a classroom and sit down and watch the teacher teaching. And what I see at my center is not the teachers being the focus. It is teachers who have found materials that just really engage, inspire kids. Usually they're natural materials. I see teachers asking questions that prompt kids to learn more, but don't take them away from the activity that they're engaged in. I could go on the playground and see such cool stuff. It's one of my favorite places to go. A while ago, when we had cicadas that emerged from the ground, I walked outside and I saw the children sitting on the sidewalk in a circle, being quiet with their teacher, looking in the middle of the circle. At first I was like, did they get in trouble? What are they doing? I walked up and I said, what are you guys doing? And they said, shh. We're watching God's cycle of life. The cicada is going to die. And they had some joyful learning related to that. So it was just profound how you can see the things that they are interested in. Those little kids were 3 and 4-year-olds sitting down still for the amount of time that they were sitting was not something that came naturally. It was their choice to be there, and they had a reason. But it was really something that this teacher was masterful at being able to tie everyday experiences to the importance of God's love. So I have to say, my benefit of being the director for the Center for Early Learning that includes the Bombeck Center is my everyday experience. And it helps me see where teachers might need some support to do things differently. It helps me see new teachers and how different they are than our more experienced teachers. But one thing that we know is that we definitely need to have teachers who, if life was a play, they were not the directors. They were the prop people and sometimes the actors. But the play is the important part. And I don't know whether you have been playing with young children lately. It's really hard to do without taking over. And taking over really defeats a lot of their learning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adams. Suzanne, God entrusted parents with the primary responsibility of nurturing their children's love and commitment to Jesus. Now, you are a parent, and you shared with us a grandparent. How do you see parents investing themselves fully in connecting their children with Jesus and his story as related to the healthy development of their children's faith?
Yes, parents are obviously the first formators of their children. And some examples of parents investing themselves fully in connecting with Jesus and his story always begins at home. I think blessing your children each day and night and praying for them, even as infants, I think is really important. And it sets the home as the place of love and a place where children can grow in understanding the message Jesus gives to each of us. I think prayer at mealtime and at bedtime in a real, structured, habitual way is a way for children to hear early on how it is we petition the Lord, we worship the Lord, we love the Lord, we give him thanks for all that he has done for us. I think parents, too, have to think about the example they set. They need to love their children and be the place of stability and security for their children. When mistakes are made, and they are made, asking Jesus for peace and calm to explain a wrong and help a child make better choices going forward really helps the child establish a habit of reflection. As parents serve the needs of others, visiting the elderly, maybe preparing food for those who otherwise would go hungry, preparing snack bags for a homeless shelter. These are examples that children see their parents performing, and again, becomes part of their family culture, their family ethos, as Sister would say. If parents can volunteer for parish religious school or volunteer in a Catholic school or their children's public school as well, but to prepare materials. Seeing their parents serve in this capacity, I think sets the stage for children to do the same as they grow older. My one granddaughter is like just a passionate artist. So she's always making cards for her cousin who lives in California and sending them to him. And, there's always a heart and love. That's family love. So again, this is what Jesus calls us to do. I think if it's possible, and it's not always possible, if parents can enroll their children in a Catholic preschool or a Catholic elementary school, this is reinforcement for parents. You're going to be with other parents in that culture, but I understand that that's not always possible. As a grandparent, I think grandparents can certainly play a role in formation as well. Offering practices of religious tradition during holiday times, praying when the extended family meets, that's just so beautiful, I think. And quite honestly, providing financial resources if grandparents can do it, with tuition sometimes at Catholic schools being very expensive. I think that's important. So Shauna gave an example of her grandmother, and I had one from mine as well. My grandma was a Polish immigrant, and she brought a Polish tradition of a płatki. It's a wafer that we use at Christmas time. And it's in a rectangle shape. My grandma would cut a strip from this wafer for each grandchild. There were 18 of us. And as each of us came in her door, she would offer us a strip of the płatki, which is like I said, sort of like the host. And she would break it, and we would consume it, and she would bless us. She would tell us what our gifts were and how much she loved us, but most importantly, how much God loved us. And then at Easter time, she would do a similar kind of ritual, but she would use a hard-boiled egg that she would cut. But again, every grandchild had their piece of a płatki at Christmas and their egg at Easter. And that kind of formation has stayed with me my whole life. Mm-hmm. My grandma could also crochet an Afghan and say the rosary at the same time. So I always honor her as one of my first formators in the faith, and I'm so grateful to have had her. I hope I do a little bit of mine.
Thank you, Suzanne. Sister Angela Ann, let's finish with you. You're going to close off for us. Just tell us your thoughts on faith formation as an awakening process.
Well, this is such a wonderful conversation. I would like it to go on and on for much longer. We're going to have to do a second program on this. But I'm thinking of two ideas. One is Pope Francis always frequently talks about the art of accompaniment, and more recently with synodality speaks about the apostolate of the ear, E-A-R, ear. And I think this is exactly what both Dr. Adams and Susan are speaking about, of how to be attentive to these children. And there's another a few words that Pope Francis brings out in so many of his documents. They weave different way, but it relates to what they're saying. In Evangelii Gaudium, Pope Francis talks about that what we are to do is to make present the fragrance of Christ's closeness and his personal gaze. If there's anything that we do in early childhood, the key thing is to make present the Christ closeness, the fragrance. I love that. Dr. Adams, you talk about scent and smell, and even uses the fragrance of Christ's closeness and his personal gaze. If we could capture that in early childhood, it will make all the difference into the future of who we are, preparing our young people to encounter Jesus Christ.
That is a wonderful way to end, sister. Thank you very much. Viewers, thank you very much. And we'll see you again for part 2.